As we move on through the patch cycle, we finally hit the point where we can give you guys the best champions on this patch to take into your games. Let's lay out the top 3 in all roles for patch 10.8. Make sure you smash that like button, destroy the sub button, and let's jump right in. Starting off with the mid lane as always, we're going to be covering a bit of a surprise given the trend of the patch as it first came out. We've been really trying to hammer it home about just how important those solo kill experience changes are. A lot of assassins were really poised to take over the mid lane. Before we jump into exactly what Vel'Koz takes in order to make sure that he doesn't have to worry about those assassins, let's talk about why. You see, when Vel'Koz goes mid lane, he can really easily clear the wave once he gets a few points into his W. As long as you play things right, you should always have control over the wave and be able to pressure your opponent's tower if they decide to leave the lane. And on top of that, they should never ever solo kill you. Your E is pretty much free CC against anybody who tries to dive directly on top of you. All you have to do is aim it right at your feet where they're going to end up, and your E is going to hit them every single time. And to absolutely maximize your pressure for runes on Vel'Koz, you're going to want to take Comet, Mana Flow, Transcendence, Scorch, Biscuits, and Cosmic Insight with double adaptive and the Health rune. The Health rune's a really rare one, but Vel'Koz has a particularly low health pool, and that little bit of health he gets makes all the difference. On top of that, for summoner spells, you're going to want to take Flash and Barrier. Vel'Koz is an incredibly long artillery style mage who does have a little bit of CC to keep himself safe. Because of that, you are almost never in range for Ignite, at least most of the time if you're playing properly. Let me frame it to you this way: if you're playing Vel'Koz and the enemy Talon is mid lane against you, do you really want to get in range for that Ignite? Because if you do, he's just gonna jump right on top of you. And sure, your E can stop him, but will you be able to stop him every single time, and will the Ignite really come in handy? Whenever you're playing against an assassin like that, you need to make sure to keep your distance, and only when the moment is right, allow them to get on top of you so that you could stop them with your E. Even better, you wouldn't even let them ever get on top of you at all. You just poke them down repeatedly and manage the wave, and always keep them pressured from a long distance. The items that you get pretty much reinforce this idea. You're going to want to rush a Ludens, as the mana and cooldown reduction is incredibly important, as well as the augmentation on your poke every once in a while. For boots, Sorc Shoes are a solid choice, but if you're pressed for cooldown reduction, you can always go for a Lucidity instead. After that, one of the most important items on Vel'Koz is a Liandry's, and you're definitely going to want to get that right after your boots. It is incredibly powerful and adds so much damage to you because of the percentage burn as well as the percentage stacking damage. After that, if you're feeling like you need a little bit of defensive power to make sure that you aren't getting caught out all the time, Banshee's Veil is a solid choice. After that, you can then buy El Rabadons and then round everything out with Zanyas just to give yourself an extra buffer to make sure that you can get out of a bad situation. But now that we've covered and explained why Vel'Koz is doing so well in such a weird situation for him to excel in, let's talk about the other two champions who are kind of obvious here. With all the solo kill experience being so jacked up right now, people who can solo kill people over and over again are going nuts. That's why Renekton is our next highlight here, as he is a champion who can stand toe to toe with assassins like Talon, as well as anybody else who dares to show their face in lane. He's a killer croc, man, there's no doubt about that. When you're rolling up in lane with that killer smile that Renekton has, make sure that you're taking Press the Attack, Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand, Demolish, and Bone Plating, with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. Honestly, Renekton's teeth may as well be the pearly white steps into heaven, because once you flash and ignite on your laners, they're definitely going to the gray screen simulator. Oh yeah, and if you're ever worried about anybody ever getting away ever again, don't worry, because the build rushes Blade of the Ruin King to make sure that nobody can ever get away from you. After the Blade of the Ruin King, make sure you pick up those tabbies or merc treads depending on the enemy team, and then get yourself a Black Cleaver for the cooldown reduction and the extra movement speed. I mean, what can I say? Renekton just doesn't want anybody to get away. And after that, pick up a Death Stance to make your sustain absolutely ridiculous, and then even more so when you pick up Asterix after that. And of course, a GA can round out your build to give you some resistances and a second look on life. The last champion that we're going to cover about the mid lane here on this patch is going to be Pantheon, and Pantheon accomplishes something very similar to Renekton, however, has more of a focus on taking his lead that he gets in lane everywhere else but his lane. Pantheon's ultimate allows him to roam really easily, and even if he feels as though he doesn't need to use it to get to the play, he can always use it to get back to his lane. Make sure that you always keep that in mind. As long as your ultimate gives you some kind of value, it's better than doing absolutely nothing and holding on to it and then doing nothing for the next 2 minutes. For runes on Pantheon, you're going to want to take Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Biscuits, and Time Warp Tonic with double adaptive and either armor or MR depending on what you're fighting against. Conqueror is very good on Pantheon, as anytime you use your empowered W on somebody, you will instantly generate 8 stacks of Conqueror, and all you need is one ability or one auto attack after that, and now you're looking at a clean 10 fully stacked Conqueror. And of course, being the incredibly offensive champion that you are, you will be taking Flash and Ignite to make sure that your opponent is dead as often as you possibly can. Unlike many other champions in the mid lane, Pantheon Pantheon doesn't have that much of a problem getting kited, as many of his abilities give him movement speed or some kind of mobility. Thankfully though, he has a great time building lethality, and that's why you want to pick up a Yumu's first, to make sure you have the movement speed to get around the map just enough so that you can catch up to your enemies without necessarily having to use your ultimate. After that, unless the enemy team has like 5 AD champions, make sure you pick up a Merc Treads. Pantheon is incredibly weak to CC, as his E is a very powerful ability that will block a lot of damage, but if you're stunned and you can't use it, well then you just die. After that, a Black Cleaver is really nice for the extra cooldown reduction, movement speed, health, and AD, as it is on every single bruiser champion that likes to buy it. And at this point, much like Renekton, the rest of the build is exactly the same, but in a different order, as Pantheon doesn't benefit from the Steric Shield quite as much as Renekton does. You're going to want to pick up a Death Stance, and then a GA, and last a Sterix. Hopefully now that it's been pointed out, you understand why it's so much better to build it in that order for Pantheon as compared to Renekton. It's important to understand differences like that, especially in a larger sense over the course of an entire game. That can apply to any lane, any champion, and any given game, no matter what the team comps are. And that kind of insight is something that we can give you on our website, GameLeap.com. Whether you're just starting or a seasoned ranked player, we have everything up there for you that you need to improve and get better at League. Every single video that we have on our website is done by a challenger level player. Everything from the basics all the way down to the nitty-gritty champion specifics, and everything in between is for you guys done by a challenger. Make sure you check us out to get exactly what you need in order to get on the right track to winning your games. As we've wrapped up the mid lane, we could take a little bit of a stroll on up to the island of top lane and begin with our first champion, which is going to be Olaf. Instead of nice sandy beaches, you're going to find yourself with an axe in your skull because this man's going absolutely crazy. Taking Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand with Biscuits and Time Warp Tonic and double adaptive and armor in your minor runes makes Olaf an absolute machine. The slow from his Q coupled with the movement speed of Time Warp Tonic gets him in range to really beat people's heads in anytime he wants to, no matter where the wave is. And Flash and Teleport will keep him pressuring people over and over again, no matter when he needs to recall, assuming that he doesn't just int. Right now, Olaf top is really hard abusing those experience changes and the trifecta of bruiser items. You're going to want to rush a Black Cleaver on him. Cooldown reduction, health, damage, and the movement speed is all extremely important for Olaf. Once you start getting a little bit of AD and cooldown reduction, you can much more easily chain axes on your opponent or chain axes on the wave to always keep your opponent pressured under tower. And on Olaf, much like with Renekton and a couple other champions, that's not a bad thing because you can very easily 2v1 if you play it correctly. After that, you're going to want to buy tabbies, and if you really need it because the enemy team has 5 AP champions, then you can go Merc Treads, but remember, Olaf's ultimate makes him immune to CC, so trying to get those for the tenacity is a pretty big waste. Once you've hopefully made the right choice and found yourself in the Tabby's Brotherhood, you can get yourself a Death Stance to really augment your healing and survivability, and after that, a Sterix. And there you go, the trifecta is complete. You are now Exodia, and nobody can stand toe-to-toe with you. And I mean, honestly, if they bring a friend, you probably just kill them both too. Once you've got those 3 core items though, after that, you're just trying to get yourself a bit more tanky, so getting a Spirit Visage for the increased healing, health, cooldown reduction, and magic resist is an amazing choice, and a Guardian Angel after that to give yourself a second look on life. While Olaf is cracking heads in the top lane, he's not the only star to be shining on this patch. Kled is also doing incredibly well. And considering the rest of the champions who are really dominating solo lanes, it shouldn't really come as a surprise. You see, Kled takes Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Absolute Focus, and Gathering Storm with double adaptive and armor in your minor runes. And because the man just wants to go in 24/7, sword gunning it up with everybody that he can find, you're going to want to take Flash Ignite. He's already got his ultimate to get around the map. Don't need 2 of them, right? Being able to charge on in and stab and shoot some people until they're dead is a pretty useful ability, and while you're building up to the point where you can take over fights like that, you make sure that you rush an early Tiamat to help Kled wave clear. It's really the only thing that he lacks, and if you can make up for that weakness, you're going to be having a much better time. Then make sure you grab a Black Cleaver and a Titanic before you even think about touching anything beyond your Boots of Speed. After that, you can pick up a Tabby or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team, and then get that oh so juicy Sterix for the fat shield. Then you can round out your build to make sure you have some sustain in the side lane with a Blade of the Ruined King, and then the ultimate item to give you as much time to remount, lifesteal, and kill everybody that you can. Death Stance can round out your build. Kled's a great champion who's had a low ban rate for a while, even though he's been riding pretty high on the patches. But the last champion we're covering in the top lane is the exact opposite of that. His ban rate is so high that you very well may not be able to get to play him for most of your games, but it would be an absolute crime to lie and say that he isn't absolutely ridiculous right now. Of course, we're talking about Wukong. The chimp champ is absolutely smashing people's heads in with his stick, and he's able to do it 2 times in 1, 2. That was too many numbers. Let's move on. Runes on Wukong are pretty self-explanatory. You're going to want to take Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Bone Plating, and Overgrowth with attack speed, adaptive, and armor. The reason why you don't need Second Wind in the Resolve tree is because Wukong's passive is exactly that. He regenerates a percentage of his maximum health every second, so you don't need anything else. And of course, in the rare scenario that you legitimately get forced out of your lane, you should always take Teleport with Flash to make sure that you can always stay safe in the lane while you scale. Item-wise, Wukong is one of those champions that we mentioned can abuse Conqueror plus Blade of the Ruined King and Death Stance, so for items on him, rush that Blade of the Ruined King. From there, tabbies or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team, and then a Black Cleaver. Once you've got those items under your belt, you can get a Death Stance to give yourself that sustain and bleed stagger that makes you absolutely insane, and follow that up with Asterix for insane value. Then finally, wrap out your build with a GA, and even though you lack magic resist for the most part, you'll still be fine because your lifesteal, sustain, and regen from your passive is absolutely insane. And now that we finished our lovely little island trip to the top lane, come swim with me down the rivers of the island and into the jungle so that we could talk about the Bush Boys. The sneaky star of the show here is definitely Ivern. Ivern's a champion whose gameplay is relatively simple, and he's a very supportive style jungler. Because of that, he doesn't need to worry about power farming all the time. He becomes extremely impactful very early on in the game. Once you hit level 6, your main strength is actually the fact that you can give your solo laners the powerful buffs from the jungle to really make them wreck their lane. How exactly do you push a tower in the mid lane with an Anivia who has blue buff is just sitting there under tower with their ultimate turned on, tabbed out looking at Twitter and doing absolutely nothing other than destroying every wave that comes into existence? And I mean, hey, that's not the only thing that you have, that's just the major part of it. You can also always gank those lanes, and on top of that, you farm really well too. As Ivern, you don't have to worry about what items you have in order to clear the camps efficiently. You just walk up to them, say, hey, let's be friends, and then they kind of just go away and you level up. Because of this, you can stay on track and get right to level 9 and start gaining that extra experience in the jungle camps from the patch. For runes on Ivern, make sure you take Airy, Nimbus Cloak, Transcendence, Gathering Storm, Hex Flash, and Cosmic Insight with the CDR rune, Armor rune, and the Health rune. And of course, being the jungler, you'd want to take Flash and Smite. That way you can flash over a wall that's really blocking you from saving your absolute monkey of a mid laner from inting over and over again, and then eventually they're gonna get a solo kill, and then they're gonna say, haha, I don't need the jungler anymore. But don't worry, between you and me, we really know what goes on. A bit of a tip here that's really important to remember when you're playing Ivern is that Hex Flash actually applies the Nimbus Cloak movement speed. Make sure you use that, as you could just Hex Flash over a wall into a bush, or out of a bush, and get extra movement speed to get into a lane and gank it. Oh, and the biggest brain one is using it to Hex Flash so that you can farm faster. Now that right there is the good. The items that you want to get on Ivern are kind of weird, but once you get the hang of it are pretty self-explanatory. You want to start a Hunter's Talisman, as you will need that extra mana regeneration. Then from there, Moby Boots Rush is the way to go every single time. After that, pick up an Athene's, as the damage that you deal will factor over to healing when you do your shielding. Then an Ardent is always useful, especially if you have a solid AD carry, and then a Redemption for even more healing and teamfight potential. After that, you can grab yourself a Zhonya's for extra defense, and then eventually sell your Hunter's Talisman for a Locket. Moving on from Ivern, the second jungler we're going to talk about here is Rengar. Rengar is a champion who is an assassin. He has so much ridiculous burst that nobody in the game shy of a tank can survive them when they go in. You have Zhonya's, doesn't matter, unless you use it to nullify his ultimate, you're just gonna die, and even if you do, you might just die afterwards. Despite the fact that Rengar is an assassin, the best rune to take on him is Conqueror, and from there, Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace are gonna round out the rest of the precision tree. Then, make sure you grab Sudden Impact and Relentless Hunter in Domination with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. You might think that with the experience changes, Rengar wouldn't be so hot right now, especially considering that he would need to farm really hard to get level 9 and get more experience. But the thing is, Rengar can actually farm really well. All you have to do is get an early Tiamat. And after that, to make sure you abuse those solo kill experience changes, you want to rush a Duskblade. You don't need no jungle item in here, you're just gonna sit on that Hunter's Machete for as long as you possibly can. Once you get that Duskblade, you have insane 1v1. With your ultimate, you can easily get a second proc of the Duskblade in a single fight if you happen to surprise somebody. From there, Edge of Night will keep you safe while dealing even more damage, and a Lord Dominix will make anybody who even tries to think of building armor really sad. At this point, you might have noticed that we never set to really buy boots, and that's because a lot of the people that we look at just don't buy boots on Rengar. They just really want every single point of AD, lethality, and armor penetration that they can get to make sure they destroy everybody. Once you get that Lord Dominix Regards, you can work on a Yumu's for more lethality and mobility to make up for the fact that you don't have boots. Then grab yourself a Ravenous Hydra as the update to your Tiamat, and if you happen to go with the no boots build, then as a 6th item, you can build a Death Stance to give yourself more survivability, more cooldown reduction, resistances, and all that that good stuff. The last highlight for the jungle here is going to be one that we actually already spoke about in another position. You see, Wukong jungle is still absolutely tearing it up right now. He takes pretty much the same loadout as top lane, except you're taking Flash and Smite. You go with Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Water Walking. The change up here is that Resolve isn't very good in the jungle, so you're going to take that instead. And of course, naturally, most fights in the jungle are very fast too, so Coup de Grace makes more sense over Last Stand. Oh, and make sure for minor runes you take that attack speed, adaptive, and armor like every other attack damage jungler does in the game. And just like how the runes are really similar, the build is pretty similar too. You're going to want to pick up a Warriors. It's an AD item, and while it doesn't give any attack speed like a Blade of the Ruined King, it gives you cooldown reduction, which is really good for Wukong. The extra burst it'll have is really solid. From there, Tabby or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team, and then a Triforce rather than a Black Cleaver. You really want that cooldown reduction for the uptime so that you can engage over and over again on the enemy team. Then grab a Death Stance and round out your 40% cooldown reduction, then Asterix, and then a Guardian Angel. No real special tips for the Monkey Man here other than to watch your enemies say, no, you can't spin twice, wait, no, and then you laugh in their face as you say, haha, monkey, go woo, and knock them up for the second time. And if you can't tell, I'm pretty sick of that happening to me. But now that we've wrapped up the Bush Boys, let's start invading the bot lane and talk about AD carries. Unfortunately, two of the champions that we're covering here have been highlighted in the past, so we're not going to spend too much time on them, but we are going to spend time on is the one who hasn't. Twitch is a champion who has a pretty strong early game. And the thing about him is that he has a very good synergy with a lot of Enchanter supports. And since the Enchanter supports are getting very strong right now, and a lot of frontline champions are also very popular, Twitch is doing real well. You see, he gets the opportunity to pick off people who are squishy a lot thanks to his invisibility. On top of that, he can shred through tanks once he gets just a little bit of itemization under his belt. The only issue he has is that he has no way to keep himself safe, and Enchanter supports can do this really nicely. And sometimes you won't even need it because you'll be so fed that you just melt through everything before it even gets a chance to touch you thanks to the extra range from your ult. For runes on Twitch, you're going to want to take Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Gathering Storm. Don't forget those minor runes, which you're going to be taking attack speed, adaptive, and armor in. And then of course for summoner spells, as is tradition for AD carries, Flash and Heal are the way to go. As far as items on Twitch though, you're going to want to go a Blade of the Ruined King first. It is the best item for him. He gets the ability to use it to chase down other AD carries who he's trying to 1v1 out of his stealth, and that's very powerful. He may not actually need to use his ultimate unless they flash away, and if they do, then he gets to save his flash for next time. From there, Berserker Greaves are the obvious choice. It's nice to have extra movement speed so that Twitch can sneak up on some extra people or even get out of bad situations, and then after that a Renekton to really make it so that you can spray and pray on people is a very solid option. After that, since you're building crit, you already should be going an Infinity Edge, and after that a Phantom Dancer. This will give you the shield, attack speed, and even more crit to synergize with the rest of your build. For your final item, Mortal Reminder is a pretty normal choice. However, if the enemy team doesn't have a lot of healing, then you can instead go a Lord Dominic's Regards for the extra armor penetration. Now the other two AD carries that have been highlighted before are Yasuo and Vayne, so let's go over them real quick here. On Yasuo, you're going to want to take Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes, and then make sure you take Flash and Ignite. This will give you a ton of 1v1 power, and even if you're 2v2ing, you get to ignite who you're focusing as the main damage dealer in the lane. This also has the added benefit of having grievous wounds whenever you want against champions who can out lifesteal you in the earlier stages of the game. Sometimes you might actually lose fights against people with 2 items, even though you do a ton of damage because they just lifesteal so much with something like Death Stance or Blade of the Ruined King. If the amount of dominance that you could flex on AD carries because of your win roll wasn't obvious already, then looking at the build makes it even more annoying for them. You rush a Phantom Dancer, which means most people are going to undergauge the amount of damage they need to deal to kill you, so you can easily bait people out a lot. Then Berserker Greaves are very important for you to build up your flow shield, and then from there you can get yourself an Infinity Edge so that you're getting that crit all the time. From there, getting a Death Stance next will make you ridiculously hard to kill. You will be on that lifesteal and survivability train like many other bruisers are. Not only do you have a Phantom Dancer shield, but you also have your passive to help buy extra time for you to lifesteal and out-sustain incoming damage. And don't forget, your ultimate also refreshes your flow shield, so you can get even more damage reduction in that way if you manage to buy enough time for a good knockup. Then make sure you fully round out your build with a GA for the extra look on life that you'll get, and a Mercurial Scimitar for that QSS effect, which is very important. And then last on AD carries, let's talk about Vayne. Vayne will take Press the Attack, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter with attack speed, adaptive, and armor like all the other AD carries before her. And of course, similarities don't stop there. Flash and Heal are tradition. As for items, you rush Blade of the Ruined King a lot like Twitch would, and then also go Berserkers, but your second item will be a Rage Blade. You really want to get those stacks so that you can start getting people with your Silver Bolts left and right. Afterwards, a Phantom Dancer will give you some survivability with the shield, as well as crit and attack speed, which are always useful on Vayne, and then you can grab yourself an Infinity Edge for the crit synergy. Lastly, if you need a QSS effect, getting a Mercurial Scimitar is very important, but if you don't, Death Dance Last is incredibly strong on her, and if you have the opportunity to, make sure you take advantage. Vayne's just really kind of destroying everything because there's so many beefy players in the game right now, and she doesn't have to worry about assassins too much as long as they come in stride and she can handle them. Her E is very powerful as a disengage tool, and her stealth from her ultimate is also really annoying to play around. But now that we've gotten past AD carries and into supports, let's talk about the remaining strong enchanter support and the other supports who are also having a lot of value right now because there's a lot of people trying to dive on themselves and their AD carries. First up is Bard, who takes Guardian, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Revitalize, Zombie Ward, and Relentless Hunter with Adaptive, Armor, and MR in your lane, and if you don't need the MR, then go the Armor, or the other way around if you don't need the Armor. Don't forget to take Flash and Exhaust in your summoner spells as well. The whole reason why Bard is strong is because of his incredibly good Q stun, his W healing, his large mobility with his E, and his ultimate, which can stop people literally like a Zanya's effect. He's got a pretty solid lane, and he can poke at people early on. He can also set up ganks with his Q stun and his E portal, and even if you're getting pressured, you can always back up onto your W healing. You've got a lot of options, whether they be offensively, defensively, or just walking around the map and picking up chimes like you usually do as Bard. For items, make sure you start a Relic Shield. This is actually better than going Spell Thieves, as you do benefit from having the tankier stats, and the ability power is still there for you. Then, grab yourself a Moby Boots for the roaming power and the movement speed all around the map for your chimes and ganks in other lanes. Then, an Athene's is a very good item, as Bard does do a solid amount of damage, and this can really make your instant W healing whenever you place it under an ally pretty strong. At that point though, you're gonna need some defense for yourself, and really nothing is better than just buying a tank item for no reason, because you can get away with it. Dead Man's is great for the movement speed, the auto attack slow is also nice as well as the extra damage, and of course the defensive stats are really what you're after. After that, you can then pick up a Redemption to really give yourself some extra healing power and your team extra healing in a team fight overall, and then lastly a Locket. With Bard wrapped up, the other two supports on here are not actually enchanters. Shaco is going to be our next support highlight, and he takes Comet, Mana Flow Transcendent, Scorch, Biscuits, and Approach Velocity with double adaptive and armor in his minor runes, and of course Flash Ignite for an offensive support playstyle. Shaco has kind of re-risen on the support hierarchy because of the change in the meta, but also because of the change in the runes. Before he used to go Glacial Augment, but now he goes Comet. This is important because anytime anybody gets feared by a box, no matter what level the ability is, that Comet is going to land unless he's like 300 million miles away. And really the way things work out is that it's the same throughout the rest of his kit. His E also slows, which will guarantee a Comet hit, and his R will have a similar effect. Having this constantly proccing constant damage that is always going to land no matter what you try and do is a really big deal, and that contributes to him having a stronger lane. But on top of that, his boxes, his slows, and his clone are all incredibly strong and great at peeling people away. When Shaco gets control of the battlefield, those assassins who are really popular and the other divers that are really popular in the solo lanes as well as the jungle won't be able to really take over a fight. They're just going to jump in, get feared, and then die in the fear. And if they didn't on the first one, well then they'll definitely die to the second one that you probably have waiting nearby. That's his whole shtick, and for the items on Shaco, you're going to want to go a Relic Shield, much for the same reasons like Bard. Then grab yourself your Sorc Shoes and then a GLP. Even though you aren't going Glacial Augment, it's still really good. Then after that, make sure you grab a Liandry's for the extra burning and constant ticking increased damage, and then a Morello to be an even more annoying Jester, and then lastly a Void Staff to do damage to even the tankiest people. The last support that we're going to highlight here is Gallio, and this is because Gallio serves a similar role to Shaco. While he is an engager, which Shaco definitely is not one, he also has the added benefit of being basically impossible to get by when you're trying to dive onto one of his allies. You just can't actually physically walk by a Gallio. He has a knockup, he has a taunt, and even beyond that, he can always ulti his ally for an additional knockup and magic defense. For runes on Gallio, you're going to want to take Aftershock, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Unflinching, Nimbus Cloak, and Celerity with double adaptive and armor in your runes. For summoner spells, Flash and Exhaust are your best choices. While Ignite is useful, the Exhaust is usually a better choice for peeling your carries. Sometimes 2 knockups and a taunt may not be enough to give your AD carries exactly the amount of time they need to be able to get out of a bad situation, so the Exhaust helps you in that regard. For items on Gallio, once again, you're going to want to grab yourself a Relic Shield. You are an ability power reliant support, and you are also a tanky support. Then grab yourself Tabby or Mercreds depending on the enemy team. You're not a sort of engaging support that likes to run around the map with Moby Boots. You actually do value that defense really highly. Then grab yourself a Stone Plate, Knight's Vow, and a Locket with a redemption last. This will give you a very big health bar that nobody can ignore. Beyond that, the Locket has synergy with the Stone Plate, and your Knight's Vow will be giving your AD carry even more defensive power. Then a redemption is always a great failsafe last item for some additional healing, cooldown reduction, and healing power. And with that, we've covered all of the best champions on patch 10.8. And to make sure you know exactly what you're doing when you're trying to pick up one of these new champions for this patch and the future ones, make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com. All of our guides up there are done by challenger level players, no matter how big or small it might seem. It could be a champion specific guide, it could be a guide on basics, or a guide on a lane that you really want to learn and get better in. Everything you need to make sure that you're on the right track to improving and winning your games is up there, and I guarantee you that you're going to find a lot of useful tips up there to help you improve and win. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching the whole video. What are your guys' top picks for this patch? A lot of champions, especially in the support pool, really surprised us this time around. But as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.